What's going on, guys? It's Cameron from Tinker's Musings here. Today we're going to talk about a really neat, affordable option for adding 40 gigabits networking to your home. And you can do this relatively affordably for about 150, 200 bucks with current eBay pricing. And not only that, you can do 40 gigabit Ethernet and 56 gigabit Ethernet, and as well as 56 gigabit Infiniband, or slower, depending on the hardware that you have in your system. So, without further ado, let's jump in and see what this switch is all about. All right, so this switch is a 36 port QSFP Plus switch. It is really cool because it supports both InfiniBand as well as Ethernet. So if you got a mix of that in your home lab, or you're not really sure, maybe you don't want to invest in lots of Ethernet ready cards, you can get cheaper InfiniBand only cards. And as long as you have an Ethernet backlink to your main network, then you could connect it with the rest of the systems on your network. Additionally, you can run this in isolated, just InfiniBand network. And some people will do that. I actually have mine configured with my Brocade. So the first two ports on this switch are configured as Ethernet. Well, actually, the first 8 ports are configured as Ethernet so far. And yeah, 2 of those go back to the Brocade on the back. So I have 80 gigabits between this switch and the Brocade. And so everything that connects to here can get an IP address via DHCP. I know people might frown upon mixing all these networks together, but for me, it's simplest if I just have everything on the same subnet. I may split it out later. This can do VLANs, you can do more advanced networking with it, but it's really affordable. I mean, I think these switches, when they were new, they cost like $20,000. Ridiculous amounts of money. And now you can get them on the used hand market for probably, 150, 200, maybe 300 on the top end, depending on where you buy this from and what licenses may come pre-installed. And we'll get into some of the license stuff a little bit later and just kind of what you can do with that. But what do you get with the switch? So you get 36 ports of 56 gigabits non-blocking. That means that within a 1U form factor, you have up to 4 terabits of non-blocking bandwidth. And you have 170 nanoseconds port-to-port latency. The InfiniBand standards have been evolving over the years, and this switch actually does support FDR, the latest 56 gigabit standard, and all the way down to some of the other standards that fit the same port. What's great about this is that you can use the same cabling that was designed for QDR, for example, and get more bandwidth if you use FDR10, for example, or the newest is 4x14 gigabits. That's the 56 gigabit standard FDR. Mellanox has this virtual protocol interconnect, and what that does is it allows you to connect devices that are InfiniBand as well as Ethernet to the same switch. And this also runs the switch manager. So if you've done anything with setting up your own InfiniBand network at home, then you don't need to run a separate switch manager instance on one of your servers. It can save you some resources. You have a dedicated switch that handles all of that for you. In terms of what you can do, it comes with the subnet manager, like I just said, and there's also fabric support, Ethernet, Then you have all of this within a 1U form factor. The switch comes in forward airflow or reverse airflow variants. So depending on how you have your rack set up, you can do a front or back rack mounting just to adjust the airflow so it fits the rest of your system. Okay. I'm just going to go over quickly what Infiniband is and the different standards that you can use. This switch does support 56 gigabits with the FDR Infiniband standard, and it's actually closer to 54 gigabits after the encoding takes place. You do have to have special cables that are QSFP and support FDR. So make sure that when you buy cables or optics that they're FDR capable. You can use FDR as 10 gigabits or 40 gigabits Ethernet as well. And then again, FDR transmits at 56 gigabits, but because of the encoding, you actually get an actual transfer speed of 40 gigabits per second. Then there's QDR, and it transmits at 40 gigabits, but then after encoding, you actually get an actual speed of 32 gigabits. QSFP is the same connector, and yeah, you can do 40 gigabits and 10 gigabits Ethernet. Then we have DDR. This is 20 gigabits and with an actual speed of 16 gigabits. And it looks like you can use CX4 or QSFP connectors. SDR is going to be your Infiniband that is most like 10 gigabit Ethernet. It's an older standard by now. You probably wouldn't be using this in your setup if you're investing in this kind of switch, but just so you know, it is 10 gigabit link, but has an actual speed of 8 gigabits. Okay, so I bought this switch for $165. I think there are other sellers that have best offer, and $32 shipping, that's not bad. It does come with an older version of the Mellanox system OS, so once you get that switch, determine what version of the system is running. In order to flash the new firmware when you get it, you just need a console to serial cable, RJ45 to USB cable. If you've done anything else with managed switches before, you should have something like that lying around. Additionally, there's these management ports in the front, and what they do is give you an out-of-band management port, so it's separate from the rest of your Infiniband / Ethernet QSFP ports. These rack ears, I mean, they're kind of a joke, really. I took these off. They're just not going to support the system, and actually have found by accident some rails that could work. The Schneider Electric 1U rails. These are fairly cheap. They're much cheaper than the rail kit that comes from Mellanox, or I guess now NVIDIA. I was looking at the part number that was mentioned in the manual, and they're selling for like $145 each, and that's just ridiculous for a set of rails, if you ask me. I bought 2 of these because I wasn't sure. I have a couple. The Brocade, wasn't sure if this would work for the Brocade. It doesn't exactly line up, but the inner rails on this package do actually line up with the Mellanox short switch. This one is the SX6036 1 BRR. They do have longer variants of this switch. I'm not sure if this rail kit will fit, but I will say that it's a pretty tight fit. However, once I put the inner rails on and mounted the rails, the outer rails to the rack, I was able to slide it in fairly easily. Because I took the ears off, there is no stop on the front, so just don't push it back too far. Another option would be to get something like this, which is a 1U shelf essentially, and it's even cheaper if you don't need it to slide in and out necessarily and kind of be supported. You can just have this mounted in your rack. I might do something like this for the Brocade because right now it's actually sitting on top of some servers of mine and being supported by that. I don't like having that equipment just dangling, and I've been told that it's okay, but I prefer having more support for these expensive switches. I mean, not super expensive, but right between the Brocade and the Mellanox switch, I've invested close to $300 in switch equipment, so I want those to last. I don't want the ears to bend or tweak the frames of these switches, so make sure you look at your setup and what makes sense for you when you go and buy these switches. Okay, so when you boot up your switch for the first time, it will look similar to this. Depending on the version that your switch ships with, you may or may not have the latest firmware. You probably don't. As of this time, this is the latest firmware. There is actually a firmware upgrade matrix, and I'm about to show you that in a moment. And when this pops up, please take a screenshot of it so that you know how you should upgrade your switch. Alright, I don't know if it's like super important that you follow the matrix exactly, but my switch came with version 3.3. I want to say it was pretty outdated. I mean, it hadn't been updated in years, maybe 3.4 something. You can probably skip a few of these steps. Just go with the shortest path. Eventually you'll end up on 3.6.8010, and as long as you come from any of the mentioned previous versions, you should be fine. So you don't necessarily have to go through each of these and go one by one, and that would be pretty excessive. It does take some time to do these updates, so make sure you set aside a few hours to do your updates and get the switch up to date. All right. This is the status board. If you want to see the ports, you can go here. By the way, the default username and password is admin. If you have configured the Ethernet gateway license on your switch, which you can do that, I would just go look on Serve the Home. There's some information about license and how to get them and install them. There is a guy on eBay that sells these Ethernet licenses. Please don't buy that. And I'm not speaking poorly of him necessarily. I'm just saying, if you're savvy enough, you can figure out the pieces necessary for making a license work for you. Don't spend $50. I guess if you want to, you could, but it's easy enough if you know how to do command line and a little bit of reverse engineering. All right. So the first two ports here, 1 and 2, are going back to the Brocade, and these are full 40 gigabit Ethernet. And the first 8 ports, like I said earlier, are currently configured as Ethernet. And if we want to see the Brocade side, these are the 2 ports that I have allocated for the Mellanox SX6036. You can see it's full 40 gigabits on this side, and then as full 40 gigabits here as well. So we have 80 gigabits going back to the Brocade. That's way more than enough, I would say, for most people. I don't know if you can add these additional two. I think these are more for breakout to 10 gigabits if you wanted to add more 10 gigabit ports, which I probably will, because currently I am using the breakout cables for my Cisco box at the moment for 10 gigabits on the front side here, for 40 to 10 gigabits. I would like to free those up, but I need to source some different cables or optics. I will say that the cabling and optics can be a nightmare when you're dealing with different vendors and different OEMs. Cisco really wants Cisco cables, and Mellanox is a little bit less picky, and I think Brocade is pretty unpicky. It's just Cisco that can be a little bit hit or miss. That's what I've got to figure out going forward. Select the protocol type if we want to assign more Ethernet ports. Here we have the Infiniband. Port 9 through 36 is currently as Infiniband. I actually don't have any Infiniband cards or devices on the network yet. I will be playing with that in the coming days, coming weeks. There are Connect IB cards that are much cheaper than, say, Connect X3. They are limiting to only Infiniband, but when I first started getting into 40 gigabits and 56 gigabit Infiniband, FDR, all that stuff 3-4 months ago, I didn't know the difference between the Connect X3 versus Connect IB cards. Even some people from my community had never heard of the Connect IB card. It is an option, and it actually will work. Yeah, if you have multiple Infiniband systems doing direct connect, or if you use a VPI switch like this that can do cross protocol. The default, I want to say, is Infiniband, because until you activate the license for Ethernet, it's going to be just Infiniband on this switch. I really enjoy having the capability of running both on a single switch. I'm curious if DHCP will issue IP addresses to the Infiniband side of the network. I'll be making a follow-up video once I get some more Infiniband dedicated hardware stood up. You can manage the Infiniband side of things. You have the switch manager. You do have to set the switch manager up. You have to enable it. It doesn't turn on automatically. There is this fabric inspector. I don't have a license for that. I'm not really sure what it does, but I think there's various stores that still sell them. I'm not doing any like high performance computing. Mostly what I want to do with this setup is have fast flash storage, fast file transfers across systems in my network. So if I've got multiple Chia plotters, then I can copy files between them with ease. Yep, and then this is the Ethernet management over here. And you can see what each of these Ethernet ports is doing. There's IP routing. If you want to route layer 3, this is where you would come in and enable layer 3. Which I had not had on until now. This is a layer 2, layer 3 switch, so you can do pretty much everything that you want with this switch on 40 gigabits and above. 40 gigabits to 56 gigabits. What's really cool is that I have one of my systems that is only connected via 40 gigabits. It's one of the newer HP DL380p G8s small form factor systems that I bought. I replaced the standard 4 times 1 gigabit connector card with the 40/56 gigabit Infiniband Ethernet card, and it's supposed to be for G9, but technically it does work with G8 because it's the same interface. And yeah, it works. I have TrueNAS running on that box, and it is connected over a full 40 gigabit link, which is really, really cool. I'm using TrueNAS Scale because it's based on Debian. I think TrueNAS Core is still FreeBSD, so driver support may vary if you use something that's not a Linux distro. Yeah, so this is TrueNAS, my DL380p G8 small form factor, and it has an array of SAS2 800 gigabyte SSDs, 8 of them. So the the thought is that I can set up an iSCSI storage and give fast flash storage to different systems within the rack. We have 128 gigabytes of RAM in here, and I've created a pool that is currently offline. Probably some issues with power. I can recreate that pool, no big deal. I've not actually been doing much with it. I'm just playing, experimenting. But as you can see, we have the link with a full 40 gigabit connection with direct attached copper, and that's going straight to the Mellanox switch. I do have HP ILO, which is still on 1 gigabit, but that's an out-of-band management port similar to other HP, or similar to other lights out like iDRAC or IPMI. But the neat thing is it works. I'm accessing this guy over 40 gigabits. Technically, it's over a slower link because I'm on my PC in the office here, but the idea is that we have 40 gigabits available to us, and once I set up the shares correctly and I've set up iSCSI, I'm hoping we can have something like 5 to 6 terabytes of fast flash. And it's going to be in RAID 0. I have backups, but hey, I have 40 gigabits, and I did so without breaking the bank. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please comment down below. And if you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you can know about the next video when it comes out. All right, we'll talk to you later.